In this episode, I speak with the amazing Tammy Guest. As you might have heard from our previous episode on the podcast, Tammy was such a huge inspiration to me, opening my eyes into what was possible for me back when I was a student studying naturopathy and nutrition, thinking that there was only one way, one path my life could take in terms of my professional career. She opened my eyes to all that was possible. And so here she comes to speak with us about her book, Unrestricted, and that's everything that Tammy's all about. So I'm so excited to bring this discussion to you in this episode, all about living life unrestricted. I hope you love it as much as I enjoyed recording it with Tammy, going to the limitless, going outside of the limitations of that anxious mind and that fear. If you're seeking that expansive feeling, you're in the right place. Okay, let's go to the show. Back to the show, Tammy Guest. What an honor to have you joining us again. Thank you so much for being here.
I always love being on your show, Georgie. It's so good to see you again.
So great to see you. So, Tammy, since you were last here, you've had some pretty big things happen, including the launch and release of your amazing book, Unrestricted.
It's out in the world. It's so exciting.
How does
Yes.
it feel to have it out in the world?
Really different. I had been working on a book for such a long time, and then the pandemic hit. And what I wanted to create transformed, and all of the feelings came up with that, the anxiety of worrying about what's the potential future for it, disappointing other people. Is it what I'm meant to do? So much around changing your path and changing my path and changing the path of the book. And when I finally made the decision, I think there's something about that for some of us who have those little worries. When you finally actually make the decision instead of sit in between the two, it just became so much easier. And I reevaluated the book, we re-edited it, we changed it, we added so many more stories to it, myself and my publisher, and so it's transformed into exactly what I wanted. I'm so excited about more people hearing about the stories and the strategies and the tools that are in there. And it's now finally out. There's this other really interesting process that happens when you have a publisher, is that there's like all these sequence of events that happen. And my first book I self-published, and it just kind of came out when it came out. but there's like a whole series of things that make this a next level kind of project, and I've had to test my patience waiting for it. But yes, people have got it in their mail, and they've got it on their Kindles right now, and I'm getting so much good feedback about it. It's been beautiful to see.
Oh my God, I can't wait to get my copy. I want my own like hard copy. So as soon as I'm back in Australia, I'm gonna go find it and make sure I have it as well. Um, this is interesting, this idea you brought up just then about sitting in the indecision, and then when you make a decision, it's almost like there's this part of us afraid of committing to a path, whatever that might be. And I think so many of us can relate to that feeling. It's like, am I going to just do this book like this, or am I going to do it like this, or am I going to wait, or what's going to happen? And when you finally commit, it's this weird thing, because your book's about not having limitations and endless
Yeah,
possibilities, right? Which
yeah.
I am so excited to jam with you about, because I absolutely love that. But
Well, you're coming to us from Portugal, so
exactly, from like my haunted great aunt's house, like whatever this environment is. For those watching the YouTube, this is going to be quite an interesting one to see the setting. But it's this weird paradox where when we do commit and in a way restrict, it's almost like we get more freedom, because you were saying there's more
yes.
flow once you choose. Tell us more about that, Tammy.
Yeah, so what you just beautifully put together there was the fact that we can feel so much more unrestricted in a seemingly restricted situation.
Yeah.
And it's through making choices that we get to do that. And a choice on how we're feeling, recognizing that we've got all of these other feelings about it, recognizing that we've got all of these other stories about it, but actually choosing to feel unrestricted, choosing to feel freedom by making a choice is one of the most powerful things that I even had the example of when the cover of the book is a beautiful an image that I got shot on my last photo shoot, and it's been kind of digitally enhanced. It's been done differently, and I live to do things differently. And it was wonderful to have a friend of mine do the cover art for me. But this photo actually came from a photo shoot that I had organized in the pandemic. In one of the final lockdowns of the lockdowns of the lockdowns, the official ones. And we thought we were all free, and then
Yeah.
restrictions hit again. And
Yeah.
I had booked this amazing photographer up on Byron Bay. And I thought, yes, I'm going to go up and I'm going to have the most amazing time. How could I not feel unrestricted in Byron, in the hinterland? Oh my goodness. For the people who are listening from elsewhere, Byron Bay hinterland is, fairyland. It's amazing. It's subtropical rainforest. It's extraordinary. It makes me feel so unrestricted. I thought, yes, this is the place for me. I had to wait 4 months for that photo shoot in the end. And
Right.
the flights for it got cancelled. So I had to drive 6.5 hours to get there. And then it just so happened when I got there, there was flood warnings everywhere because within 24 hours after my photo shoot, so the photo shoot happened, but it rained the entire time. So I had all these wonderful spell dresses and amazing kind of wardrobe goodness for the front of my book and all my projects to come. And then it was pouring with rain, like you wouldn't believe, torrential. And so I've got all these amazing nudie lifestyle pictures instead, and the incredible artwork that went on the cover of my book. But what happened was 24 hours after the shoot, the whole place got flooded in. And that was the big floods of the Northern Rivers region. And I had to either stay there and stick it out at that Airbnb, or I had to drive through floodwaters 6.5 hours to get home. Otherwise, I wouldn't have got home for another 7 days.
Wow.
And when you hear that story, part of my brain, all it can hear is restriction, 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 all these places. But the beauty of it was in every moment that I had restriction, I could find and get curious about finding a way to feel unrestricted within the restrictions. I had the most amazing time in my photo shoot because it was just me and the photographer inside. We had this really great connection on the camera, and we got really, really creative with nature and rain, and then to have that particular shot on the front of my book meant the world because I could also see how we can all choose unrestricted in any situation, but it's about getting curious first
Yeah.
rather than buying into the whole other stuff that happens in our brains.
Totally. It's like tuning into that perspective that's always available to us. I remember going through the lockdowns, one thing that I would do to feel unrestricted or to feel freedom was to just like go for these runs, but like I would run down hills like a little kid with my like. There's this scene from Friends with Phoebe. She's running around like Central Park and she has her arms flailing like Kermit the Frog, and like I was just like doing that too. And it just felt so fun. And I just did it purely for the feeling that it gave me.
Yeah,
And it was so rewarding. It's almost extra rewarding when you can find it in those restricted moments.
totally. In my book, I talk about rules going to fuel. And a rule is a BS rule that we've all bought into, a notion, an idea, a rule that somebody said once and that we just unconsciously followed, and a pattern or an imitation that we've picked up from somebody else or society. And it's within those, it's even more fun when you get into a seemingly rule that everybody says you should do
Yeah.
and find a way to flip it and turn it into fuel. It's just so much more fun than just doing the thing. It's so much more fun to actually go into it and then flip it out into the fuel that you need to transform into a new way of doing things. Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. Tammy, were you always like this? Was there always this part of you that was just like expanding, so easily curious and just like feeling into the freedom? Or is it something that you've had to flex and grow like a muscle?
I think there's always a spark as a kid that led me to believe that was an option. There's always an opportunity for something different. Um, Now that you asked the question, good question, by the way. My dad was in the Air Force, so we moved around every 2 years, and unknowingly that created a restriction, and I had no say in the matter. I couldn't change the fact that we moved interstate and overseas. We lived in Malaysia when I was a kid, and that continued until my high school years, and I moved every 2 years. I've been 12 different schools as a kid, just from my dad moving us around. And in it, there's an opportunity to get stuck, put your heels in, do it, or there's an opportunity to just do what you're told to do. But then there's the little bits of magic on the inside that you can, you know, go and explore, like you said,
Yeah.
explore a different place and run in a different way, explore a different place and be friends with the people who you wouldn't usually be friends with. Because literally 2 years later, you're going to go make new friends anyway. So I think there's something fun and curious that has been in my nature all along about running experiments. But that's not to say I haven't had challenging times where I've totally had to build it. If it's a restriction after restriction, I have no choice in where I'm living and what school I'm going to and what people I have to be around. Then, yeah, of course, there is a internal stretching of your comfort zone continuously to, push yourself to get a bit curious about what the other options could be.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I think it's like never have I been more aware in my life of the neutrality in everything, that nothing is good or bad. So even restriction itself, like what we were saying at the start, has its merit and its value. And one personal realization that's coming through for me of late that I've been working through is the idea of choosing motherhood, because for my whole life it's been this idea of that's a restriction, that's a like you have to give
Mm.
everything to this other being and you just can't be you anymore and you can't give to yourself, and it's like one or way or the other. And it's been this realization of okay, like maybe it doesn't have to be that, maybe through the choosing one path you get to open up all this new freedom as well. So it's really amazing in that way. Are there any other things you can think of, like stories in your life where, like choosing the book, there's been something you had to choose that might have felt in a way like a limitation, like a restriction, that somehow evolved magically?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Where do we begin? So what you just did there, Georgie, is that you actually had a rule that I share. I shared when I was in my 20s, definitely. And I had a rule that motherhood wasn't for me. It was restrictive. It turned women into, these stay-at-home beings that had no choices about anything, and it was completely conflicting with my freedom. And that it even took over our entire bodies, and that shouldn't happen. All the and you'll
Yeah.
notice the rules happen when shoulds kick in. You know, Either somebody's told us a should, or we just should all the way back with resistance. And there's something really interesting about that I was never going to have kids. Never, ever. It was not my jam. I was going to be the cool aunt that traveled around the world and came back with really cool gifts for everybody. And then I met my husband, and he had two kids. And I was smitten. I could create these amazing make memories is my jam. I love making cool memories. I love making moments in people's lives. My dad was a photographer, and I kind of see the world the way he does, in that he sees it in snapshots. And how could I make the best snapshot in somebody's life that they anchor and remember forever? And that's what I did with my I call them my kids because they've been with us, our entire relationship. But my two eldest are actually my step kids, and to create memories was the most freedom filled thing I could think of. My eldest loves cheese, and originally, when I'm a nutritionist and naturopath by heart, and when we first met, all she ate was pasta and cheese separately. She wouldn't eat anything else. Like, it was cheddar and pasta.
Wow. Okay.
And so I took her to a cheese festival, and she was like, marinated feta and all of these amazing brie and ashbury, and how does all of this, how is it all even made? And I love the science of things. So it was great to be able to change my perspective on what it was like to have kids enough that it only took a couple of years. And all I could imagine was, if I want to experience everything that there possibly is in life, and this is the fuel, flipping a rule of, you should do this because society says you should be a woman and should be a wife and should be a mother. I flipped it and went, well, if I want to experience absolutely everything in life, and I want to fill it with all of these experiences, good, bad, otherwise neutral, I cannot wait to experience what it is to have a human growing inside me, if that's part of my jam and if my body allows it.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened after a while. So my third child arrived in a amazing water birth, and it was crazy cool, and it's been cool ever since. So I think that there is opportunities wherever you happen to be, whichever brew you think about, start getting curious about it and turn it into fuel and play with it for a bit. It may not stay that way, but it's fun to be able to play and get curious about it.
This is what life's all about, right? And this is why I'm so, like, I love questioning our anxious mind and all the fears and all the rules it comes up with, because we just don't know what we don't know. Like, you in your 20s, you just didn't know what was possible. And even me, I'm yet to experience that motherhood. I mean, I'm a fur mum, so I feel very strong maternal instincts in many ways, but it's just, that's something yet to be an experience. So I love the idea. And in fact, it makes me feel unrestricted to think these experiences I'm yet to have and what I'm yet to know.
Mm,
And like, how could that feel expansive? How could that be freeing and liberating?
yeah.
Yeah.
And how could it be unrestricted? That's my favorite question at the moment. How could I feel fully embodied in the unrestricted feeling if I really went for this? If we
Yeah.
did that a different way, if and I think there's something really fun about that, whether it is, what would it feel like to, in the business world, I get a lot of business mentees. What would it feel like to make six figures? A lot of people freak out and they get a bit stuck just below the six-figure mark. And then we get a bit stuck again at the 6 to 7 figure mark. And there's these funny little things that happen internally. We've got these internal thermostats. And when we start to kind of nudge them and go, okay, what would it feel like if we went over there? What if it didn't feel scary and fearful? What if it didn't feel like something that was unsafe? And whatever that opposite is for you, it happens to be unrestricted for me. But whatever that is, I wonder how it could feel unrestricted. I wonder what it could feel like if it was safe. Yeah, business wise, expansion wise, going to a new city in the world wise.
Yeah.
What would it be like to be in a relationship that's different? What would it be like to be in a body that's different? I'm on a bit of a health kick at the moment, just starting to move my body again after a couple of years of, having excuses not to. So what could it feel like to feel unrestricted when I go and work out, or when I try some new movement with my body and see what it actually feels like to be in it? Yeah.
Just opening up to those possibilities. Tell me,
Hmm.
who is unrestricted for? Who have you written this book for? Is it for
So
everyone?
it's you know how I feel about that. I love talking to women in particular, and I really love talking to people who have a mindset that allows them to think a little bit differently. So you could be a leader in your corporate world who's doing a little side hustle on the side, or you could be somebody who's thinking about expanding your current business, or you could be running a business, but it does have a business slant to it, that's for sure. But it's particularly for women who want to do things differently.
Yeah, beautiful. And I think, do you feel that women in particular have these, I don't want to say more rules, like more shoulds, more, we've got the glass ceiling, right? And particularly when it comes
Mm.
to the idea of income and what is possible for us with our earning potential. Is it more of a thing for women?
In my opinion, yes. And in a way, the more marginalized you are, the more likely it is that you have rules that are put on you by society, or put on you through your lineage, or put on you through all of these other ways and means, because we just get blanketed down in the shoulds. And they're not true. The thing about all rules is that they need to be picked up, looked at from different angles. And although society might continue to believe that rule, you can choose to start to see new evidence, new examples, new opportunities inside your own world that prove that rule to be not just wrong, but flipped to use as fuel to give you trajectory into a completely different outcome to what you should be in.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. And so one of the things that, yeah, we can definitely get stuck on is like there's all these there's things that we can't, that we just automatically think that we can't do, and we don't become aware of them until we start asking these questions and seeing what's possible. It's like there's so
Mm.
much we can't see unless you have that outside perspective. Do you feel that Unrestricted, through being able to read this book, it's going to give people those perspectives that they might be blind to?
Yeah, absolutely. And it also gives tools. I'm such an actionable orientated person. uh, Knowledge is great, and wisdom is fun to play with, and ideas are great to talk about. But unless you take action, I've got little challenges throughout the whole book. And they're only little challenges, but they're enough of a comfort zone bumper upper that you get a little bit of a stretch to know yourself, to be the person that is so much more full of potential than the person you think you are to be. So it's a little bit of a nice little wordy mess with your brain there, but essentially having actionable steps that really stretch and start to see the gifts and talents that you have in there, and those other things that you were just describing, what's on the other side. If you can even start to stretch that a little bit by taking some of the challenges either in the book, or and I've seen you ask perfect questions on not just the podcast, but definitely on your Insta on a regular basis, Georgie. These great questions, and if you actually stop and take a moment and not just consider it, but take an action towards answering those questions, you can start to see the world differently. And
Yeah.
the anxiety and the fear that, we hear all the time in our heads starts to take a back seat, or just into the passenger seat rather than the driver's seat, when we start to question those things and take action on them. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Something I just want to circle back to because well, honestly, it slipped my mind just before. I was like, what was that question I was going to ask? Is it's almost like we go through this evolution of waking up. Look, and I don't want to turn this into a women versus men thing, but it is still so
Hmm.
prevalent. There is still so much of the overhang of the patriarchy to work with here, and we can't just pretend that we're all fine. In fact, I pretty much grew up. I remember in high school feeling like, oh, that's all solved. That was just in the past. That was in the olden days. And then sort of slowly it came to my awareness as like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, like we still have pay gaps. We still have ways that women are treated differently to men and opportunities and things like that that can come up. So
Hmm.
it's almost like the evolution, particularly in the business sense, seems to be okay. I can do everything a man can do. And
Mhm.
we do, and we can. But then there's like this new element evolving. Like the question is, and I'm sort of deliberately setting this up here, but do women have to show up like men to succeed in
No.
life?
Now that's a brule and a half, isn't it?
Because we
If
do this in the corporate world, right? What do we see?
Agree, yes. And we see it changing as well. I've seen some amazing examples of feminine leadership. And I mean, the Prime Minister of New Zealand is one of them. So she's not doing it in a masculine way, she's doing it in a really feminine way. We've got leaders in Sweden and Norway and the kind of those Northern European countries who are all feminine as well. And the choices that they're making are very different. And the way that they're running their governments are very different. And their responses to crises, especially with empathy and compassion and presence, is very different. And so we see that reflected, albeit it's not, prevalent just yet. We haven't gone into the full tidal wave of it in the corporate world.
Yeah.
But I see it, especially these past 2 years, feminine leadership is really stepping up. Even in the small business space online, you've seen that masculine marketing is just, we just call BS on it all the time now. You see that weird spammy stuff. You see those big red links, buy now buttons and
When
things
you
like that.
said that, I literally had an image of red in my mind, like the color red on like a sales page or something.
And all those pointy pointy arrows and stuff, and then you sign up for something and you get 36 emails later, like
Yeah, absolutely.
all that stuff just isn't working anymore, and we're not standing for it anymore as a society. It's not just women that aren't standing for it. We all call BS on it, and I think that there is a slow, it's not a revolution, it's an evolution, and it's unfortunate, but we are part of that. And hopefully some of the tools in the book can help others be part of that as well.
Yeah. I'd love you to just go a little more into what feminine leadership looks like, because I think that's like hard for people to grasp. Like, how is it different from that masculine? You mentioned the empathy, the compassion.
Mm-hmm.
What help? Because it's like we have these female role models? Do we have them to look up to? It seems like they're few and far between in many ways. To see the ones that are really doing it in a way that feels balanced and sustainable for them.
Yeah. So traditionally, over millennia, we've had, and when you look back at Indigenous cultures that were matriarchal, not patriarchal, some of the more obvious themes are empathy, compassion, storytelling is a huge one, and being able to share a lineage through art and through nourishment. So it's a really different environment to strategy, warfare, um, and conquering, and all of the things that go along with that. And although they have ways in which they mesh in different societies, over the span of the examples of leadership that we've had, there is some really standout moments of storytelling, especially for female leaders. And gosh, there's so many great books that have incredible stories where everybody can see themselves in there, rather than the dictatorial style of telling somebody how it is and not giving a beautiful example of how it's been related in your life. There's empathy and compassion, especially in crises, rather than, again, dictatorial and strategic on what should be done. There's a moment of presence, a moment of silence, a moment of reflection. And then there's a couple of others, and there's some really good books about it that I've read recently, especially the one with, it is called Women in Leadership, and it's by one of our ex-prime ministers.
Julia Gillard?
Yes,
There we
yes.
go. I'm like, who have our been our prime ministers? We had so many switchovers for a while there.
We did. Yeah, and there's just some incredible examples of how to do things differently. And I think the whole world happens in a pendulum swing, and we've gone all the way to one way, and we've seen the Trumpisms and the other bits and pieces and all of the lovely white men who are making very dictatorial decisions. And then we're going to have a big swing the other way. It's one of the reasons we've got so much activism right now in all sorts of different places and spaces, and it'll swing all the way back, but then we're going to find somewhere in the middle, and I'm really
Yeah.
excited about being part of that.
Yeah, I love that you brought that to it because it's not like there's necessarily right or wrong. Like, it's not that masculine is bad or that men are bad.
No, not at all.
It's just that we want
No, not at all. The,
balance.
yeah, absolutely. And the outcomes often are the same, to be honest. We all make mistakes as humans. We're all humans being human.
Yeah.
And the outcomes are the outcomes, but the way we get there as a community matters. And I think that there's something in that that women have to contribute that is going to be powerful and different and is so needed at the moment. Yeah.
Interesting though, because there's often a perception that the feminine or that the feminine way of doing things, storytelling, but creativity, all these beautiful things you talked about, are weaker. Are they weaker,
Mm.
Tammy?
Well, the art that stayed around for millennia, it stayed around because women had things to do with that, you know. But when you're on your deathbed and you're holding someone's hand, chances are here in the Western world that over 85% of those people who are going to be holding your hands are going to be women in those carer roles. And, you know, it takes a lot to sit with somebody as they pass. And I wouldn't call that weak. And obviously, having babies is one of the most incredibly strong, courageous things you can do. And yeah, I think that there is so much more to explore when it comes to, again, the rules that hang around in those places and spaces that we're looking at with women in leadership and women in strong and courageous roles. Yeah,
Absolutely. On that too, it makes me think about how, for example, I grew up in my family with this perception of like, don't get emotional about it. Like we shouldn't be, that's not the right way to do things. And it's like, well, you got to be logical. You got to stick to the rational. And at the end of the day, our emotion is the backbone of so much when it comes to business, when it comes to the reason why people buy things is from
totally.
emotion. So it's so, so important, isn't it? Like,
Yeah,
it's
and it
so
takes a lot
powerful.
more courage to feel it. In the world that we live in right now, it takes courage and strength to feel your emotions, and a lot more than just switching it off and numbing it.
Absolutely. Exactly. And now, Tammy, you've recently been in, was it, you were at Uluru?
I was.
Tell us about
So
that experience.
part of my unrestricted life is how can I contribute in ways that are important to me and that align with my values. And this opportunity came up to be part of. I fly helicopters, and it's one of my favorite things to do is to fly. And the Westpac rescue helicopter is a local helicopter in New South Wales that helps rural areas and helps in rural areas for people who get lost, get stuck, have accidents on, out there places and spaces. And it's all contributed by corporate donation or public donation. And so we did a fundraiser, and we did with about 40 other vehicles. We raised over $200,000, and each flight cost around $4,000. So we've managed to save, it's quite literally, we have saved that exact amount of lives by affording that amount of helicopter flights, which is quite an extraordinary thing to do in
Wow.
and of itself. But then we are driving around 7,000 kilometers, the drovers run. So it's areas that the drovers used to go through Australia. And I was part of the first half of that this past week, and it was a beautiful, amazing give back. It was incredible to make fast friends that are salt of the earth and be part of experiencing Central Australia in a way that I had never experienced it before. And yeah, it was cup filling.
Yeah, wow. That sounds
Mm,
incredible, Tammy. Like, what a way to. It's so funny that you say that's cup filling when you were giving so much, like you were serving so much.
yeah, yeah, interesting. Yeah.
That's how I like to believe this can work. You know, we can live
Mm,
our lives giving and receiving
yeah.
at the
Yeah,
same
that
time.
reciprocity just happens. It's beautiful.
Yeah, so beautiful. So, what do you feel you've learnt about yourself going through this whole book writing journey?
Mm, good question. Writing a book, if anyone's out there thinking, yeah, I'd love to write a book, it's a journey. It really is. It's a commitment, and to do anything, whether it's a commitment to your health or a commitment to your business or a commitment to a relationship, those things need consistency and being persistent. And there's days where you just want to give up. There's days where you want to throw it out the window. There's days where you just want to burn it to the ground. There's days where you want to hide under the sheets. But I think anything worth going for does take a level of being consistent and persistent. And when the consistency is not there, you just got to be more persistent. And so I learned that I have the capacity to be consistent and persistent. I learned that I have the capacity to be patient and allow for creativity and muse to come and play with me
Yeah.
rather than forcing it, because the more
Yeah.
you force it, you're going to strangle it and it'll die. And the option there is to actually get curious and open and surrender, even when it's not quite coming for weeks on end. And then all of a sudden, something changes when you let it, when you don't strangling it. And there's something else about having your highest values and goals in mind. It's a bit like the sun. Your highest values and your goals are consistently there. And even when you can't see them, they're on the other side of the world. They're still there, rotating around. And having that on your horizon, um, it's something that just keeps you going. You know, get to the next horizon, get to the next horizon, get to the next horizon, and eventually you're there. Yeah, so I feel like that's what I've learned from it.
You described that so beautifully because when you talked about like when it's not like you know the commitment and then you've just got to persist and be persistent, that made something in me go oh, but then you explained how it's persistence can be patience too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Persistence can just be knowing that the sun's gonna rise, like,
Yeah,
and that it's okay. And it'll rise again. And then you might feel it to move towards it again. Yeah.
it's not cracking the whip on yourself and saying stay chained
Oh
to
no,
this
no, no.
computer like
No. Often that's the worst thing you can do. I often describe it around, I have this ginkgo tree out the back and I love it. And we have an apple tree out the front. And if I was to just get it to fruit all the time and I was strangling it to fruit all the time, what do you think? Of course, it's not going to fruit. It's under so much pressure and it doesn't have the opportunity to grow. It doesn't have the space. It doesn't have the interaction with the wind and the rain and everything else. And it's exactly the same as our nature as human beings. If we're consistently putting ourselves under pressure, consistently expecting to fruit and to fruit and to fruit, and not paying attention to the fact that we have seasons in our well-being, seasons in our business, seasons in our lives, and being with the pace of those seasons, then we all end up in burnout, and that's not fun. I've been there too many times for that anymore.
yeah,
So yeah.
yeah,
Mm.
no more strangling, no more forcing.
No more. No, the fruit will come whether you strangle it or not. So you may as well not strangle it. It's just
Oh,
literally a matter of time.
you know, I was about to ask you, is there like one key message or some kind of sentiment you want people to walk away with when they've read your book, or one like common thread through it, but it's almost like that was beautiful on its own.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else you'd like to add there, Tammy? Like anything that you just that's the gift of the whole thing for people?
Yeah, I think you have the opportunity to not go with the status quo. You know, the things that you're told you should be doing, the things that you've believed all along, may not actually be your beliefs. And it's an opportunity to see, do I want to do this differently? And in all areas of your life, here's business. Do I want to do this differently? Here's marketing. Do I want to do this differently? Here's my body and my movement and my nourishment. Do I want to do that differently? We get to play with that and feel so unrestricted, even on your next meal, even on your next breath.
Yeah.
And what if you did? What if you did? Yeah, that would be it.
I love that so
Mm.
much. Tammy, thank you so much for joining me and sharing all
I
your.
always love chatting to you, Georgie, and your peeps. It's awesome.
You have the best stories, and I just love and wisdom, and it's just so beautiful to connect with you every time. And I guess my question for you now, and I'm so curious what the answer is what's next for you?
Ooh.
Or are you not there yet? Because that's totally fine.
So I had this amazing experience in Uluru and then Katajuda and then in Kings Canyon of silence.
Yeah.
I hadn't had it for such a long time, but the silence that you there's such an interesting experience to be had in the quiet, in the silence. And something out of that comes through you. And I think we are all so fearful of sitting in silence, being quiet, staying still. But when we get the opportunity to lean into it, quite literally, I was leaning back on Uluru while I was thinking about it. um, it has a presence to something new coming through. And it's kind of like listening to the cells of an apple tree grow, you know?
Yeah.
There's such patience in it. And for me, that's what it is at the moment. There's patience. I have projects that are going on, and I get to see you at an amazing conference in Hobart. Um, I
So
have,
excited for that.
yeah, and I have all of these amazing experiences that I can take people on. But there's something about the presence and the leaning into what it is to be okay with that that I'm loving playing with at the moment.
Beautiful. If you're ready for the deep dive into this work to master your anxious mind, I invite you to join the Anxiety Reset program. Over 90 days, I'll be guiding you on how to build your mental resilience, reprogram those limiting beliefs that keep you stuck in self-doubt, heal your gut, balance your hormones, nourish your mind, body, and soul. Using a combined approach of naturopathy, nutrition, hypnotherapy, and live group coaching with me, you'll feel supported and motivated to show up for yourself consistently, day after day. And this is how you will experience extraordinary results. You can master your anxious mind. The best time to begin is right now. Let's do it together. You'll find the link to learn more in the show notes. Thank you for listening. We have reached the end of this episode. If you enjoy this podcast and you find it helpful, I would really appreciate it if you would hit subscribe or share this episode on your Instagram stories and make sure you tag @Georgie the Naturopath. But that is all for today. Please be kind to yourselves. Know that you are enough and you are exactly where you need to be.